Welcome to the Detour podcast. This is episode 9, I think it is, episode 8 or 9, one of those anyway. Tonight we have someone special. I say tonight because it's early in the morning for him. The man with the golden voice, Phil Liggett, the voice of cycling. He's entertained your viewers in 47 Tours de France. I had 44 down, but Phil, correct me on that. He said Wikipedia is a bit slow. 47 Tours de France and 15 Olympic Games. He's been a regular visitor to Australia. First came out here in the late 80s. Covered the Commonwealth Bank Classic for Phil Bates and has been coming here virtually every year since. I know he's been part of the furniture at my Bay Classic for, 20-something years. And, of course, Sun Tours and Tour Down Under right from the start. So everyone in Australia knows him well. So g'day, Phil, and happy birthday for tomorrow, mate. You're going to tell us how many years it is?
Well, I can tell you. It's 77. I can't believe it. I tell Trish not to plan anything special tomorrow because I don't see any reason in celebrating being 77. However, I've done over 200 kilometers on the bike in the last few days, so I feel pretty good. So I could be around for a while longer. As we speak, John, of course, it should have been 48 tours and 16 Olympics. But, of course, they were both cancelled because of the situation. I've got a couple of weeks to go, and I should manage then to commentate on the Tour de France, but from London studios rather than from France, which will be another first with the Tour de France, yeah.
So now's the time where I introduce our sponsors, and you know most of them, so you can stick your 2 minutes worth in. Firstly, we've got Bike Exchange, who have been a big part of the Mitchell Scott team sponsorship over the last few years, sponsoring the team in Asia and everything. But the Bike Exchange is, I know it's quite big in England now and in lots of parts of Europe, but they're very, very big in Australia. It's where the world buys, sells, and learns and rides. Bike Exchange, where a bike is never just a bike.
They should be doing well right now, John. Everybody's riding a bike.
They are. Look, in Australia, Phil, the bike sales have gone absolutely through the roof. And a lot of the bike shops have got no stock, especially of the cheaper bikes. They've just got nothing. So I had to get a bike for a mate just the other week, and I had to go retail, which I've never done in many years. But I jumped on Bike Exchange, and it was fantastic. It was the best way, and we got the exact bike he wanted quite easily. The best place to buy a bike on them is bikeexchange.com. So it's simple as. Our other sponsor, of course, is Let's Go Motorhomes, as you well know.
Many night in them.
Yes, you have. The Jayco fitted Let's Go Motorhome. Get out and explore your backyard. So the funny thing is, Phil, normally this time of the year, all the motorhomes are hired out because of all the international visitors coming, but they haven't been able to come. But amazingly, it's the Australians that have jumped in and been hiring the Let's Go Motorhome. So it's been fantastic.
They're staying at home, yeah.
Yeah. So as I said, let's go explore your backyard, hire a Let's Go Motorhome or camper van for your next great escape and take the bikes along with you. Now, the guys have told me in Let's Go Motorhome, Andrew, he said, you tell Phil when he comes here, he can have a motorhome for as long as he likes. So if you want to stay and have a holiday, you can have a Let's Go Motorhome to take Patricia around some of the places you haven't. There's not much of Australia you haven't seen.
Thank Andrew and tell him he might have made a fatal mistake offering that because that's my style of existence. I love being out in the wild and nobody around. Great.
Exactly. And Lexus Blackburn, and you've met Andrew and Sarah.
Met some nice people there.
Yeah. I remember you took the car back for them, cleaned it all up. They were very surprised at how clean you brought the car back. So very unusual for the people who I take out there to get cars.
But still Liggett, not John Tavaro returning the car.
But Andrew, Sarah, and the Moore family, wonderful people and great sponsors of cycling. They sponsor the Lexus Blackburn Bay Crits, which hopefully will be on again. Hopefully you'll be back with your adult owned in January. Yeah. Not sure what the date's going to be just yet, but we'll get to that. But they also sponsor the Women's Herald Sun Tour, and we don't even know if that's going to be on at this stage. It's all up in the air at the moment.
Everything is, John. Everything is.
Yeah. But we had a great weekend of racing just gone. The Strada Bianca last week, and then Milan San Remo on the weekend. And I don't know that I can't ever remember where they were debating over who was going to be the favourite, whether it would be Alaphilippe or Van Aert, and they ran 1-2. What an amazing performance!
It was a great performance, and I watched it too. And I thought when I switched on, I was halfway through the race. It was a big pack. I thought, oh, well, they couldn't have gone all this way in a big pack. But the action at the front was flat out racing. Nobody could get off the front of that peloton, and the descents were hair-raising. And Alaphilippe is one of the king of the descenders. And I admit I'm biased. I did say to Trish an hour before the finish, the camera picked up, I think his number was 211, which was the guy who won, Wout van Aert. And I said, that's the guy who'll win the race. And he was at the back of the peloton. Well, it made me look good when he did win the race, but I was so sorry for Alaphilippe because he got back from that flat tire, got back in the race, attacked where he'd always planned to attack, and only one guy could reach him. I say I'm biased because this time last year, I was making a video with him in the Sierra Nevadas in Spain. I was on an electric bike, and I remember he was Specialized are bringing out their new bike, and I rendezvoused with Alaphilippe. I'd never actually spoken to Julien, and I started in French speaking to him, and he said, but I know who you are. I said, you can't. He said, yeah, I watch you all the time. He said, you say nice things about me. I said, Julian, I'm beginning to like you. I said, but let me remind you of one thing. He said, what's that? I said, we're going out on the bikes, and I'm going to bloody drop you up this climb. Because it was the climb at Sierra Nevada. It's a long climb, 20 we didn't do the whole distance, of course. And he just laughed. Well, he was a great actor. I honestly, I rode past him on the electric bike, and he was, and I dropped in. And, it was just a fabulous, and he was a really, really nice professional person to meet. So ever since then, I'm how lucky we're Specialized, because when they launched the bike on television, I think it was the 19th of July, they launched it. Guess who was wearing the yellow jersey of the Tour de France?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely unbelievable coincidence. But it was all good. And so I was happy. And what a defense, too, of going back to back was his aim. But to get second, that'll do me. That was terrific defense.
Oh, look, fantastic. And look, talking about Alaphilippe and the Tour de France last year, it's still one of the greatest performances I've ever seen. I mean, we kept marking the day he'd lose that yellow. And then into the last week or something, he might even just hang on. And he gave it a real go. And I'll tell you what, this year, with all that's going on, he's definitely going to be in there with a chance, for sure.
Very, very much so. And of course, the connection with the 1-2 at Milan was Van Aert crashed on the time trial in the Tour de France last year very, very badly. And that was the time trial that Alaphilippe won. We never know if Van Aert was beating him in the time trial, but he hit the barriers just before the finish. And he was still in hospital right through to almost Christmas. So a great comeback by Wout van Aert and a brilliant fight by Alaphilippe. So I'm amazed they got the race away, but they did. And, well, the season does seem to be on.
Well, we're talking about that right now. So let's continue on with it. I mean, I was one of the skeptics. Normally I'm the other way. I'm always glass half full guy. But
I'm a skeptic too on this.
But I just didn't think that the season would get started, and it has got started, and they're getting into it all right. So far, all the races seem to be working. Their protocols, although I hear that they're a little bit stretched at times, but they're still working. No one's popping up with a positive. And so Tour de France is 2.5 weeks away, but big chance that it's going to happen.
Well, I don't know if you've been watching the Tour of Poland as well, but yesterday's stage, there was a huge crowd at the finishing line, and there was no social distancing there at all. So I know they haven't got many cases in Poland, but they are having cases. In fact, Trish, my wife, is going to a dance camp there in 2 weeks' time. But bit of a worry. Britain, who've been in the UK, are very cautious now. They're watching all the cases around the world, and then they make you self-isolate when you get back if they don't like the country concerned. So the last thing I want to do is for Trish to have to self-isolate, but that's another problem. Where am I going to stay?
Well, Kay's been hoping that she'd have to.
She wanted to help probably 2 or 3 years, I would think. Yeah.
So I just thought we'd just take a step back because I've known you for a long time, Phil. But I first actually it was Trish I met first when I came out in 1973. We came out and raced as amateurs with Ron Webb, the Aussie who used to run all 6 days. Sadly died. Yeah, good mate of ours. But what a wonderful guy! And he organised the whole season for us as amateurs. So Donnie Allen, myself, and Clyde Sefton, Josie, Donnie Wilson, we all come over. Just a great year.
What a team.
Patricia was Ron Webb's personal secretary, PA, and that's when I met Trish. But evidently we met around about that time because I didn't realise so much later. But we raced together in the Brian Robinson Grand Prix at Crystal Palace.
Yes. Indeed.
1973. Well, there you go. I didn't remember that. I remember the race, but I didn't know you. But you were in there. You probably were
I was in 73. Yes, I was purely as a journalist. I didn't organise that one.
No, but it said Donnie Allen says you are on the race program.
Oh, well, I was racing in 73.
Yes, 73. You are on the race. So we never realised, but we actually raced against each other.
Well, there you go. I wouldn't have seen anybody, would I?
Well, I don't know. A Dutchie got rubbed out for slinging off me in the sprint. I thought there was an English guy on the other side. It might have been you who gave him a bit of a hand.
That sounds like Sid Barrister. Don't tell Sid.
But we talk about you doing 47 Tours de France, 15 Olympic Games. I mean, you've been part of the furniture for Australian viewers for a long time. And for a lot of those tours, it was always with Paul Sherwin, and Paul was a good mate of mine as well. I raced against him. Matter of fact, we used to go to a few races together. He lived not far from me in Belgium. So I heard you say that you never had an argument with Paul, but surely you must have had some run-ins at some time. Come on.
In all honesty, the only one that I can recall, Paul had been after me to go on safari because at the time he was living in Nairobi and where he was actually brought up, and he's desperate to get me out there to go on the safari, get away from it all, 10 days. And so I said, okay, I give up, we'll come. Charter safari for 10 days. So we rang up all his mates. We even got a camel safari involved for 5 days in the middle of it, etc. And we actually only slept in a proper hotel at the first day we arrived and the last day before we left. Other than that, we were staying in tented camps or on terra firma. It was fantastic. And we took along Graham Watson, the photographer. I remember Graham being the great photographer he was. Paul asked him to take a photograph of him standing by this bird, which was a hornbill. And Graham says, no. I said, what do you mean, no? He said, I'm on holiday. I don't take any photographs. I'm on holiday. This is my holiday. And he had no cameras with him. And we had a great time. But to come back to your point, we were up right in the north of Kenya, a place called Samburu National Park, which is wild, wonderful place. And we're going along, and the heavens opened like rain I've never seen before or since. It was torrential. Paul, it was very hot too. And I was in the car with Paul's fairly new mother-in-law, of course, his wife, Catherine, me and Trish and Graham. And Paul says, I've got a flat tire at the front. I said, great. Well, the shower won't last long, Paul. As soon as it's off, we'll all get out and help you. No, I'm not waiting that long. Let's do it now. Let's get out now. You won't believe this. Dry lakes were flooded already and it was coming down. I said, Paul, we're not getting out in this. And his mother-in-law said, Paul, this is when you realize your best friends are really your clients and they ain't going nowhere until the rain. Paul got so annoyed with everybody, not with me, with everybody, just jumped out the car. He only had a pair of shorts on, nothing else, because the rain was really warm, but torrential. He gets a 2-meter long jack out. He says, you all better hold on because I'm jacking the car up. And he pumped the car till we're up at an angle of 40 degrees. And he got the wheel off, put the new one on, and got back in the car. He was saturated to the skin, but he didn't care. He was a hard man. Don't forget his great storyline is never wore gloves in a bike race, just his hands. No matter what it was, cold didn't matter. Never wore gloves, hard man. And so off we went again. And I'll tell you, if we had not have stopped at that time, when we came 2 kilometers down the road, we saw a female cheetah with her 2 almost adult youngsters. They were nearly as big as she was, so probably placed them about 15 months old. And an orange tried to challenge her. Well, that was a mistake. She just stood up, looked at the orange, which is a big creature with 1.5 meter horns and dead straight. And she just chased that thing so fast over the hill and out of sight. It was gone for 20 minutes, leaving the 2 kids with us. And we just sat and watched them for ages. So there was a silver lining on that heavy rain. But that was the only time that Paul and I came close to falling out. We've had our joke fallouts many times, because I think SBS put it on the show once. I went in, they were filming in the studio, and I didn't know. I walked in with my coat on, and the noise in there from the music, Paul was bashing it out on his DVD. His music isn't the best. And I said, "Hey, is there any chance of turning the music down?" He goes, "What?" I said, "Is there any chance you can turn the music down?" "I can't hear you. The music's too loud." That was Paul. That was Paul in a nutshell. What could I do but laugh, hang my coat up and sit down? He wasn't going to turn it down.
So I know it's a silly question, but you must miss him.
I do. I think about him every day. I'm not alone in that. I get lots of comment every day too, even now. People like, we used to work for World Cycling Productions right through our commentating career, making videos and stuff. And Tim Grady is the boss of that. He sold the company now. And Tim wrote to me only 2 days ago and said, "Boy, I miss Paul," because it's just the banter and the chat. He was a person in the room. Morale was always up, always, "What's up with you? Let's get out of here." And that's how he got his jobs on the tour, because he was a talented cyclist, but he wasn't the world's best. But he was great for the team. He'd make that team laugh, and in their own language. And if they got low morale because of a situation on the road, Paul got the job of staying in the room with that person at night to bring him back up to speed, so he'd come out on the tour next day thinking, "Let's go again." And he did that in life. Nothing was a problem. He's very generous with his time. Even to the day he died, he was helping the people of Karamoja in Uganda. They loved him. They were devastated with Paul's death. Totally devastated. Bwana Paul was very, very special to them. Yeah, we all face this crisis at some stage of our life. We just didn't expect it to be December the 2nd, 2018. That was very surprising.
Yeah. So tell me the story about how you got Paul involved in the commentary.
I was reading, I think it was Cycling Magazine back home in the January time of the winter of that year, but 85, I think it was. Might have been 86. And I read that Paul was planning this to be his last year in Europe, but he might come home and ride the domestic scene as a pro for maybe a couple of years. And that was the story. Well, I was on the tour, on the Paris race, as I did it every year in those times. And usual half-stage finish on the Promenade des Anglais, which is a sprint, and then they have the time trial up the Col d'Ez, and then we all go home. And so I ran out of the press room onto the finish line of the morning stage, and I got Paul up by the 200 yards past the finishing line. I said, "Hey, are you packing it in?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm going to race this year." He said, "I'll race back home, but I can't tell you who I'm racing for." I said, "Well, what are you going to do after that?" He said, "I'll find something." I said, "Well, we made a good friendship throughout 10 years of following him on the tour. And he was a good talker, always great on the interviews. We had a good rapport, same humor. And he always got me half a grapefruit at the start line every day and gave it to me. Journalists weren't allowed near the food, so it's not like it is now. They used to have like a buffet for the riders to go and get stuff, but nobody else allowed near. So Paul used to slip me a half a grapefruit. So I didn't forget that. So I said, "Paul, would you like to, if I can arrange it," because cycling was getting much more popular on television here, and sooner or later they're going to want a second guy alongside me. But at this time, no, it wasn't there. So I said, "If I can fix it, would you like to work on TV with me?" And he just looked at me and he goes, "Yeah, give it a go." I said, "Great." And that's where we left it. I said, but what I did say, I said, "Okay, you're not going to tell me who you're turning pro for in Britain, but whoever it is, would you have them write in the contract you won't be racing during the month of July, just in case this job materializes, and then you'll be on TV with me during July. Well, about April that year, I got a phone call from Raleigh Industries. That was the sponsor. I knew the guy very well, a guy called George Shaw. And he goes, "Hello, Phil, it's George here." I said, "Hi, George." "Don't tell me Sherwin's going to ride for you." He goes, "Yeah, he is, but it's still confidential." I said, "Okay." He said, "But I've got this strange request of him." I said, "What's that?" He said, he doesn't want to race in July. I said, "No, I advise him to put that in." I said, "Look, George, ITV will happily allow him to wear a motif on his top on the telly saying Rally Banana, the team, as it was going to be called." I said, "But," I said, "he's got to think of life after." And he says, "That's fine." He said, no worries with that at all, because 23 days on the tour in Vision with Rally Banana, probably as good as you get him in a bike race.
Yeah.
So he said, "That's it. Okay," hung up. I never spoke to George again. In fact, he died a couple of years later, but never spoke to George again. But that's how we proceeded. And lo and behold, more than a year later, Paul won in his last 2 seasons in Britain. He won the Circuit Criterium Championship, and he won the National Road Championship in the year he retired. And during that time, he started work with me, and he was a natural. I said, "Paul, I'll give you the same advice I got when I started in commentary," which was because I was asked by the presenter of the time in April of '78 when I did my first job. He said, "Phil, just remember why you got the job." And I said, "Dickie, I've no idea why I got the job." He says, "Because they liked you." He said, "Don't change when you go on air. Be yourself." And I said exactly the same to Sherwin. I said, "Paul, you've got the humor, you've got the relationship, you're a natural talker. Stay that way. Don't turn posh on me." And so we've been like that ever since. Our lives just became, we did things together that was automatic. We went to dinner together every night. We walked the compounds together. We never walked alone. And people used to comment on it. We never realized we did it. And we always used to go and chat with the people in the television, what we call the outside broadcast trucks, to make them laugh before we go on air, because they have a tough life. They're locked inside a black box for 6 to 9 hours, and they can get a little bit fed up in there. So we go and give them a few jokes, and then go out on air and do the job.
That's a beautiful story, Phil. He was an amazing man, and he had a photographic memory too, which was just used to stagger me. He used to remember things from back in the old days. I just used to blow me away. Now, we're talking about Africa. You've had a place in Africa up near Kruger National Park for a long time. What dragged you? What attracted you to Africa?
Well, just as apartheid was coming to an end, but at the time it wasn't, I had a phone call from South African television saying that we've been recommended to contact you because we have a big bike race here and we understand you know cycling. I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, look, we'd like to give you a 10-day holiday in South Africa with your wife, all expenses paid, and quite a nice fee." But I couldn't accept it because I was a journalist. And they already had problems with Mike Gatting, the cricket player, who'd gone there to play cricket. He got banned and hauled over the coals and blacked for taking part in apartheid sport. And I said, "I can't come. I'd love to come. I've heard of your race, but I can't come." It's a race that had 12,000 riders. In those days, it was called the Argus Cycle Tour. Cape Argus was the local paper. It hadn't yet closed down Cape Town, but it was getting that way. Well, the following year, apartheid was clearly collapsing, and they made the offer again, but of course, nothing like the best offer they made the previous year, because now they didn't need to persuade me. And I said, "I'd love to come." So I went, and I remember stepping off the airplane in Cape Town and looking at Table Mountain and saying, "What a beautiful place South Africa is." And we made lovely friends. I remember that the lady, the wife of the guy I met at the airport, who had won the first Cape Argus cycle tour back in 1978, when a group of 500 cyclists got together to ride around the peninsula of the Cape to make people be more aware of cyclists on the road. And she gave Trish a bunch of beautiful flowers from the fynbos, which is they call it the 8th wonder of the world, the fynbos. It's all the beautiful flowers that grow nowhere else on the mountainsides and the fells of the Western Cape. And so I just fell in love with the race. I did everything they wanted of me. They fell in love with me, and I've done every Cape Argus. It's now called the Cape Town Cycle Tour, so as not to offend all its many sponsors. And it's run every March still, although I think it'll struggle next year. But it's run every March, and I've done every one since 1990, I think, or 89. I never remember the start date. And that's how it started. I fell in love with South Africa, but Sherwin always used to say, that's not Africa, that's too modern, that place. Come to Africa where I live, which was Nairobi and then eventually Uganda. And I went there. I told you the story about the cheetah. But I didn't, it wasn't because we knew each other, we started going to Africa. It was a total coincidence, but we both became involved. Paul wasn't great on his birds, and I helped him on his birds. Now he's an expert, I was an expert. He was very good on wildlife, and he spoke the local language of Swahili. So he was absolutely brilliant when he wanted to contact these people. He used to talk to Chris Froome in Swahili, and he'd spot a Kenyan flag on Alpe d'Huez. He'd say, hey, what's this? And he'd wind the window down. He'd shout something at the lad in Swahili. The lad would drop the flag and, well, who spoke Swahili? And Paul drove by. It was hilarious. Yeah. And Paul would just laugh himself. He just belly laugh like this, laughing, because it was that kind of guy. No, so we both fell in love with Africa. I got heavily involved through my wife Trish with saving the rhinos. They were being killed at nearly 3 a day, which is unsustainable. And we'd gone down from 12,500 left in Africa, South Africa, which is the main base for the rhinos, to about 2,500. We've had a great year this year. We've shot a few poachers and we haven't lost any rhino, which is a big bonus. It's just become a way of life, and because of that, now we all know the terrible situation with the fires of Australia last year. I become even more involved now with Australian wildlife. I'm an ambassador for the Cleveland Koala Centre of Excellence in South Australia. We've got involved with trying to put what they call the golden babies back into Kangaroo Island, which they rescued, disease-free, etc. We've got the situation in Monarto, one of the Adelaide zoos, open plains. Well, thankfully, for the generosity of Jerry Ryan, we have a huge area there now, which is South African savanna. And we've had a baby rhino born 2 weeks ago, but the actual rhinos that we're bringing in are from originally licensed from Africa. They're in New Zealand, I believe, at the moment, because the Australian government wanted a neutral country, first of all, to quarantine them. Then they will come to Monarto, where you'll be able to walk among them in this savanna, and any offsprings will go back to Africa. So it's a big world, but I seem to find all the four corners of it working with animals, which, don't forget, John, animals was my first love. I began life as a zookeeper. Cycling took me away from it. And I went to live in Belgium to try and be a pro, and I never went back to zookeeping, but I've kept my interest. I'm a patron of BirdLife South Africa. I'm a fellow of the BirdLife in Britain, etc., etc. Yeah. And I tell you what, if there's any good to be had out of the disastrous period of this COVID virus, it's the animals have returned to reclaim a lot of what is theirs, and their whole attitude has changed. I got locked down. I spent an extra 2 months in South Africa, which wasn't intended earlier in the year. And the animal life just changed. Elephants came to our house, literally came to our house, because there's no movement of people. And we saw birds that would come to the river, like the African finfoot. They would just walk down the river. They're wonderful birds. They've got huge red feet and stand out like a traffic light. And the crocodiles lying around, much more relaxed and friendly. A buffalo walked across the river to our house. We'd never seen a buffalo walk across the river. I've never seen a giraffe in the river. They were standing in the river. So, life, there are good things as well as bad things coming out.
Well, hopefully I'll get there. I mean, you've had an invitation for Jerry and I to come and stay in South Africa. We'll get there. We will get there.
I don't know when I'll get back, mind you, because COVID has taken off since we left. And it's, I think, the airspace is closed. Yeah. I can't see us getting back before early next year, if we're lucky.
Now, you spoke before about being in Africa and not having a camera, but Patricia has become a wonderful photographer. I mean, I see some of her shots taken around your property of wild animals and birds, and they're just staggeringly good. So tell us a little bit about the Patricia story, because she's quite interesting. She was a elite athlete herself.
She was. We met because I hit the back of a police car when I was training on my bike. Police car's fault, by the way. He stopped to nick a scooterist and left his vehicle on the highway, which is a 2-lane carriageway. And the guy I was behind rode straight into the car, and I followed him. However, I broke my collarbone. That's the only bone I've ever broken, fortunately. And then I went down the cycling club by the weekend, and Trish had been going there for a while, but I'd never noticed it. My cycling club was a big club, 150, 200 members, and I didn't go there very much at all. And this would have been in 1968, yes, because she'd just come back from the Winter Olympics. Not just come back, because the Winter Olympics were in February, and this was about August, September. And one of the guys, unbeknown to me, had pointed out that I couldn't drive anymore. And would she pick me up, because she went past my flat where I lived in North London on her way to the club. And you know, Trish, she was a bit begrudgingly, well, all right then. And so she picked me up, and I felt obliged to take her to the pictures, because after all, you've got to say thanks for picking me up. And that's how we met. She, as you know, doesn't sit down for more than 2 minutes. As I'm speaking to you now, she's doing a Zoom dance instruction class, and the rumba.
G'day, Trish.
She's in 2 rooms across. Our living room is now a dance hall. We never go in the living room for any other reason.
Now, you just said she was just come back from the Winter Olympics. She sort of scooted. What was she doing there? As a spectator or what?
No. She was a spectator. She qualified in Cortina d'Ampezzo in Italy, and to go alongside her brother. That was the reason, because her brother was a real homeboy, and he was talented. And so the only way to get John to the Olympics was to qualify herself. And so she did, by the narrowest of tenths of a second, and she became, with John, the first brother and sister British duo ever to take part in an Olympic Games. And I think it might even be the case to this very day. And so they went, and of course, Trish will always tell you she was awful, but she skated all the distances, and she finished them, and she made a lot of friends. John was very good. He finished quite high up in the 500 meters, big, strong boy, held up. Between the two of them, though, they held every British record as well. So they weren't that bad. And Trish started going out with the most famous speed skater in the world, a guy called Erhard Keller, who I never met until much later when he bought some greyhounds, I think. Anyway, that didn't work out, so I took over. And I hate to say it, but it's 50 years married next year in March. Where's the time gone? I mean, our life is full, that's for sure. Our neighbours think we're mad because we never sit down. I look at our neighbours lying in deck chairs every day because our weather's fantastic at the moment. And we're either doing the garden or coming in from a bike ride or going down to another house we've got down the road and doing the garden there. We never sit down. It's rush. As I always say to people, you're a long time dead, so let's wait till then, till I do. Yeah.
So you first came out to Australia in late 80s, so I think it was 87, 88 for the Commonwealth Bank Classic. I think it might have been the centenary Commonwealth Bank
Bicentennial, that's exactly right, and that's how I was introduced. You know Phil Bates, who is a wonderful guy from Sydney.
Legend.
Entrepreneur, an entrepreneur organizer. We always call each other Hello Phil with 2 L's, and he used to say to me, Hello Phil with 1 L, because that's the way he spells his name. Well, he came to the tour of Britain, which was called the Milk Race, and I was the race director of it. And on one of the rest days, it was in Llandudno in Wales. He sat down and he says, mate, he talks very slowly, mate, I want to have a chat with you. So we did. The chat lasted 10 hours in the same seat, just gently drinking in a lovely summer's day on the rest day of the tour in Llandudno. And what he was doing, he told me all about his bike race, his milk race, which was the Commonwealth Bank Cycle Classic. And because it was bicentennial year coming up in 88, he was starting up at Bond University in Brisbane, and he was going right through Sydney, where he would normally finish, right down to the Botanic Gardens in Melbourne. And I'd never been to Melbourne. I'd never seen the Botanic Gardens. And I'd heard the Sun Tour was finishing the same day in the same place. And I'd never heard of the Sun Tour either. And So that was in '88, and I just loved Australia. I flew into Sydney, and this lady met me and said, "Right, where are you going now?" I said, "Well, I thought I was there." No, you're flying somewhere to the start of this race. I'll go and find out. She went and checked all the desks, found a ticket for me on Ansett, and which are long since gone. Yeah. And she, there's your ticket. She says you're going to Coolangatta. I said, where the hell is Coolangatta? Anyway, I followed the queue, followed the signs, and I remember the guy in front, the ticket man checking the tickets, just said, "Have a nice day, mate. Great weather up there at the moment." And he had shorts on. I'm dressed with a bloody UCI jacket and looked like an idiot in long trousers. I thought, it's out of place, this. And when I got there, I walked out of the airport, and sat on the wall was the chief of police from Great Britain, who I employed to organize the escort on my milk race. And Phil had got to him, and he'd flown out earlier, and I never knew he was there. And I walked out, and he always says, "Hello, Liggett." I called him Monkey because his name was Monk. I said, "Monkey, what the hell are you doing here?" He said, "I've come to pick you up. Get in the car." Couldn't believe it. That was my first introduction into Australia. My second came minutes later when I went to the hotel, never saw the hotel by name, went into a side door, walked down the stairs, met the sponsor, Commonwealth Bank sponsor, a guy named Alan Turnbull. Alan just said, "Nice to meet you," he said. "I heard a lot about you. Let's go out for dinner." And he turned to his oppo next to him and said, "Get Phil a white Mercedes. Let's take him out." And the guy said, "But the restaurant's only next door." "Don't worry, we'll give him a run round Coolangatta." Well, it's just surface paradise, really, is where we were staying. Yeah. And so I remembered that, luckily, because the key had no number on it. I didn't know the name of the hotel. So off we went, and we finished up in a casino, but I didn't know it was a casino. We were in the restaurant in the bottom. Sat down, it was one of those Benny Han's Japanese places, slicing the prawns at 1,000,000 miles an hour and catching them, and it was wonderful. I made a lot of wine, and I was jet lagged. I'd just flown in. I got up to go to the loo. When I came back, they'd all gone. And I looked at the guy there. I said, "Where did they all go?" He said, "Oh, they left, sir." "What? They left?" I thought, well, hell, I don't even know which way the hotel is. I don't know the name of the hotel. I'm slurring my words. And so I walked out of the hotel, and I thought, well, it's got to be on the left because the ocean's on the right. So I'll walk north and hope I find it. I immediately walked into a tree and twisted my ankle. So I'm now walking with a limp and slurring my words. So I couldn't ask anybody because I was an old drunk walking down the road. Well, I was young drunk in '88. And there was nobody going to help me. So I went and I spotted the satellite dish off John Rowley's outside broadcast truck. It was in the car park behind a high wall. That's the gate I went through. So I'm there. So I walked over to the gate, and it's a code. I haven't got the code. Don't even know the number of the room when I get in. I waited and waited. Some guy came in, and I followed him in. And then I finally got to reception and said, "Look, let's tell him the situation." He told me the room I was in. I went to bed. I came down next morning, and I met Alan Turnbull again at breakfast. He said, "What happened to you last night?" I said, "What happened to me? What happened to you?" He said, "We went upstairs to the casino." They were only upstairs, and I left the hotel. So that was my second introduction to Australia, and from then on, it was only going uphill. I had some wonderful times. John Rowley was doing all the television. We were doing breakfast television on Channel 10. I remember interviewing a prawn fisherman in Coffs Harbour who was complaining because the prawn catches were coming down now. He was only getting 9 kilo in some catches at night. And when I asked him his name, he said Bruce. I nearly fell off the stool. We were live television. From then on, I thought, not everybody's called Bruce in Australia, surely, but it was really Bruce.
That's great. Well, I know it took 3 or 4 years before I snaffled you and down for our Summer of Sailing, which was the Bay Classic.
I did 18 years on the Bank Classic till it came to an end, unfortunately. By then, I'd already moved down with you.
Yeah. Tour of Tassie and all those great. And I remember Tour of Tasmania where the Cadell Evans won up Mount Wellington, where you made the great statement this kid could win the Tour de France one day. You've dined out on that a few times.
Well, I have, and Cadell joined me in the end when he finally won the Tour. I mean, Phil Anderson and I were just watching. as they climbed Mount Wellington, and Cadell scalped everybody, including the ONSE team. And I said to Phil, "What's he doing riding mountain bikes? This kid could win the Tour de France." To Phil Anderson, he goes, "Yeah, good." You know, Phil's like slow talker, means every word. So we went down to the finish line, and I said, "Hey, Cadell, you've got to stop this mountain bike," which he was extremely good at. He'd never been the world champion.
He was world number one.
He was world number one. That's right. He rode for Volvo, but he said, "Volvo look after me, and I want to reward them with a great ride in the Olympic Games of 2012 in Sydney." And 2000 in Sydney, which would be just about 2 years after the moment I was talking to him. As always happens when you save your best for one event, he crashed before Sydney and broke his collarbone. It healed in time to ride, but he was a washout in the race. I think he finished 7th. He was not competitive. And then he did turn pro. And I remember during the Tour de France of that year, I was following him in the Tour of Austria, which was current with the Tour de France, and he won the Tour of Austria. He now had a contract with Seiko. And so it started. But then, of course, that brilliant Tour de France, it wasn't an easy win for him in 2010. And I said to him at the finish line, SBS got the biggest viewers ever, because it was all down to that time trial. And he scalped poor old Andy Schleck in the time trial, but that came after a wonderful chase through the Alps to Alpe d'Huez, where Andy won and Cadell had to fight to save the race. It was just fabulous. And then the emotion that broke on the Champs-Élysées, because I was working for CBS, SBS was really on the side for me. I was working for English TV and American TV. And then the SBS guy said, "Get over the barrier and interview Cadell for us." Well, I just finished with the Americans and the English, so I left my box and jumped the barrier. Millions of people now got behind Cadell with a cameraman chasing me, and I got him on the shoulder and pulled him. I said, "Cadell, it's Phil." And he looked around and he said, you told me I could win the Tour de France in Tasmania. I said, "Yes, but I wasn't expecting you to take so bloody long about it," because it took him 12 years or something before he finally pulled it and got it. But Cadell is the most interesting guy. And I also had great pleasure in calling his World Championship win too in Switzerland, which is another memorable moment.
Wow, that was amazing. I think that was 2010 and the tour was 2011. But
was it?
Great years. Yeah.
2011, doesn't matter.
Yeah. But back to you coming to Australia. So Jerry Ryan has been a great sponsor of a lot of the bike races that you've come over for, and you've become a close friend of Jerry's.
Well, the man is an icon and just a beautiful person in sport and life. So you can't not like Jerry.
We've had some pretty good New Year's Eves with Jerry over the time as well. No, it's a bit that way, isn't it? Some wonderful times. But I remember one New Year's Eve where Jerry got called away for some reason and couldn't be there. So you and Patricia came out on the boat with me. But we were on a little boat on Lake Ngambie on the Goulburn River. But something happened to the lights. We had no lights. What's the fire? The fireworks at midnight, and then we couldn't get the lights going, and we ran aground in the boat.
Aground in the shallow waters of the river. But in fairness, and I vouch this to Jerry, you had not had a drop to drink at all because of the responsibility of steering that boat. I was full of admiration for you because all your crew was totally drunk, and I remember sitting on the front with 2 of the other guys in the group, all shouting different directions to you. And I thought, and you were the only one that was sober, saying, "All right, lads, leave it alone. I know what I'm doing."
I would have been better off if I got drunk. I probably wouldn't have ran aground if I'd been drunk. But anyway.
Well, this is true. But it was a memorable night. And yeah, I do remember that one very clearly. Yeah, Jerry missed a great one.
Yeah, he did. But we have had some special ones. But one of the night that really brings everything to typical Jerry Ryan luck. We talk about the luck of Jerry with, he brings the Jayco dealers to the Tour de France in 2013. On the day they win the team time trial, that yellow jersey, that's his luck. But I remember one night we were having New Year's Eve at his lovely house at Ngambie, and it's a little lake, and they've got all these beautiful trees, and so it was a really hot night. I remember that we had our feet sitting in the pool.
Yes.
And as it got dark, he had like fairy lights in the big gum trees around on either side. And we didn't realise, but what the lights attract the sugar gliders, like the flying foxes or the sugar gliders. And suddenly the sugar glider started jumping from one tree to another, chasing the insects that were attracted by the lights, and entertained us, but especially you and Patricia, who were both, right into birds. No, and it just for nearly an hour, or at least an hour, actually, it just flew from tree to tree, sometimes right between us. It was just
they don't fly.
Amazing.
They only can come down. They can't go up.
Well, that's true.
They climb the tree and then they drop off it, put those flaps.
Well, when it come past me, it looked like it was bloody flying. Okay, and it was after midnight. It was after midnight, but that was staggering. And I remember saying to Jerry, "Did you stage this somehow?"
He's never seen it since. Apparently, they never saw it again. No. Definitely on that one night stand. Yeah,
it was amazing. Yeah,
it was, and I'd never seen them before either, or since. But
so, well, we're going to take a little break now, and when we return, we're going to talk about Lance.
Excellent.
Eyes on Bikes help grow small businesses. We are the world's #1 bike marketplace, where buyers and sellers are brought together in a place where a bike is never just a bike. Bike Exchange, where the world buys, sells, learns, and rides.
Phil, I covered my first tour in '98. And you'd already been going around for a while then, and that was sort of the start of Lance Armstrong. And then we had all those years where he dominated the tour and took us all for a ride. I know that you've copped a bit of flack over the time because you supported him when the world was turning against him. What's your take on that when you look back at that time?
Well, I'm not sure the world was turning against him. Social media was, because this is the new world, isn't it? I have no regrets or anything of my involvement with Lance. What I would say straight away is Lance never paid me a cent to do anything for him. I commentated on him as I saw him. I'm not an investigative journalist. I'm bolted to the television to make my comment. And I'm not going to say things that I think might be the case. Because that's not. I'm a true Brit. You're innocent till you're proven guilty, as far as I'm concerned. I was rather hoping it wouldn't come to that. Of course, I was, because Lance was doing a lot of good, as well as cheating, if you like, to win the Tour de France. Although cheating also is a strong word sometimes, because everybody else was doing the same thing. He'd spotted it very early on. Now I don't know what happened between when he developed his testicular cancer and he came back, because the year he came back, of course, he won the Tour de France. And he came back with a totally different body shape and a fitter man. Now, I don't know what was going on in between. Yes, EPO was part of his treatment at that time, and that's a well-known story. But I do know how much he suffered to get through that problem of cancer. And I saw all his X-ray plates, and you can do nothing but admire the man for the way he fought his way out of that hole. He told me personally about how after he'd had the chemo first or second time, his head was bandaged, and he said to the doctor, "Can I ride my bike?" And the doctor looked at him, I think it was Indianapolis where he was, and he said, "If you can ride your bike, then go and ride it." He said he did 5 miles and he sat on the sidewalk virtually in tears because he didn't know how he was going to ride back. And he went from that to winning the '99 Tour de France in spectacular style. The only other leader, I think, was Jan Kesipu after the situation crossing the Noirmoutier. Look, Lance had realised what was going on. He gave an ultimatum to his team. Lads, we either do what they're doing and we'll do it better, or there's no point in us riding the Tour de France anymore. That's what he told them. And I've got that on pretty good authority. So we never told anybody else, of course. Now, contrary to what social media says, I wasn't a friend of Lance. You can't be a friend of Lance. He's not that type of guy. He had his couple of confidants and nobody else got near. And yes, I even flew in his private jet with him on board. He didn't sit by me. He used to sit and look at cyclingnews.com and then see things he didn't like and shout to his agent, "Hey, sue this guy." And that was his attitude. He said, "He's talking bullshit, just sue him." And then he just said, "I don't even take part in arguments anymore. I just sue him." And of course, he won every lawsuit. At the same time, building a hatred from everybody in the outside world because he always was winning and they couldn't catch him. So it became a personal vendetta. Be quiet. That was Siri butting in. And so I said nothing. I just did my job with him. I wasn't employed by him. I was employed by a guy from Canada who was a brilliant organizer. And even when I got the call to work with Lance, it came from this guy, Joe Dutton in Canada. And Joe says, Lance Armstrong says, would I work for him on his charity gigs around Europe and North America? And it developed into South Africa and Australia. And I ignored the mail. And then I wrote back, because it came 2 weeks before the Tour de France. And I wrote back, and it would be 2002, I think. I wrote back and said, hi, Joe. I said, look, Joe, the dates aren't really good for me. And the answer is no. But thanks for thinking of me. And I did that because I did not believe Lance had said he wanted me to work for him. And then during the tour that year, we were in Amiens. And I was walking out of the hotel through a cobbled courtyard. Didn't even know the US Postal team was staying there. And they had a private room having dinner. And suddenly the door burst open as we were crossing the courtyard, and Lance ran straight towards me. I thought, Christ, he's going to hit me because maybe he didn't like my commentary earlier in the day over the cobbles in northern France. And I said, hi, Lance, how are you going? Good, yeah. Did you get the letter? Are you going? I said, what are you talking about? He said, did Joe Dutton contact you? I said, yes, some guy did, yeah. Well, what do you say? I said, no, I thought he was talking bullshit. No, I asked for you. I said, don't believe it. He said, look, man, you got to go. This guy's the best organizer in the world. He gets all the people there, and it's fantastic for the Cancer Foundation. I said, okay, I'll drop him a line during the Tour de France and see what happens. And so I never spoke to Lance again. That was about day 5, I think it was, of the tour, stage 5 into Amiens. I never spoke to Lance again until he was standing on the podium in the middle of the Champs-Élysées, just within shouting range of Lance. And as Lance was stepping off the podium, he stopped. He looked at me. Are you coming or what? I said, yes, I am. Good. And he worked for me. And that's about as many words you get out of Lance, even to this day. If you want something, it goes, no hi, Phil, no hi, just, I need to know this guy's address, L. That's all he would do. That's his mails. He never wrote mails of any length. And so we never got close to him, but I admired what he was doing and the money he was raising. And he raised a lot, $600 million.
Look, there's no doubt about that side. I mean, there's 2 parts to him. I mean, when I had cancer, and he was going through the height of the inquiry, you'd say he'd just been on with what's her name? I've forgotten her name already. The journalist,
Oprah.
I'm just been Oprah, and he. Someone told him that I had cancer, so he sent me an email, which is really
nice thing for Basso's mum.
Yeah,
Basso's mum even supported.
Yeah.
Fignon asked Paul Sherwin because Fignon didn't really know Lance. Fignon, when he contracted cancer and it was bad, he asked Paul, could he put him in touch with Lance? And Lance tried to help Fignon as well. There's 2 sides to every story, John. There's no doubt what he did was wrong. But he'd recognized that all the other riders, as did the organization of the Tour de France, that they were all taking it, because if they weren't all taking it, they would have given the second place riders the victory in the place of Lance. But they didn't do that because they knew the second guys were probably guilty as well.
Look, that's true, mate. But the thing, I think the main reason that he's not going to be forgiven in a hurry is because of his arrogance and the way he chased down some of the journalists who were doing their job. But look, I can remember Dan, who's producing this for us today, and I were in a pub in Dunedin after Lance had ridden in that Tour of Ireland, and he came in and he was the most affable. He poured a pint of Guinness that we all shared and told some stories, and it was fantastic. But there's 2 sides to everything. But
look, he is. Trish doesn't like him because when he was driving Trish and me to his helicopter, his private jet rather, I was in a different car. Trish was with Lance in his car. She said, Lance stopped. I got to get a coffee. He got out, got a coffee, never asked if she wanted one, and drove onto the airplane. So she's got no time for Lance.
Well, there you go. I'll always remember to buy Trish.
He loved her coffee, but he never even asked it, or anybody else in the car for that matter.
So, who are some of the famous people that outside of cycling that you've met because of your commentary?
Quite a lot. I met quite a few with Lance, actually, with Cheryl Crow. I remember seeing Cheryl in Nice, and I was at Lance's, they've got a little place in Cape Verde, and I met Cheryl. I think Cheryl's wonderful, such a talent. I said, hello, Cheryl, I'm Phil Liggett. She said, I know who you are. And she was such a natural person. She was a lovely person. And then I met his other girlfriends, Kate Hudson, I met on the flight. And I like Kate, and I remember Kate's the daughter of Goldie Hawn. And I said, Kate, I think you're fabulous, but I do like your mum better. She goes, yeah, she is kind of cute, isn't she? I said, yeah, she is kind of cute. Lovely people, all of them. Robin Williams, he rang up the Tour de France to our outside broadcast unit once. We're on a mountaintop. I can't remember which one, but I remember seeing it. Paul leaned out the box and he said, hey, it's the phone. It's for you. Well, we never get calls on landlines. I don't know. Anybody had found the number anyway. Anyway, I picked the phone up off Paul, and it's Robin Williams, who I didn't know at the time. And he's mimicking me. His commentary was me. And I couldn't believe it. And I said, and I twigged. I said, I've been looking for you. What do you mean? I said, I want to sue you for imitating my commentary. Oh, right. And we made friends. I met him many times around the world. I commentated him all over the world. I interviewed him on stage. It's a tragedy that what happened in his life, because I guess he was a depressive, but there's no reason to be. I got some terrific ties with him. I interviewed him on the stage in San Francisco once, 800 people. I didn't know he was even in the room. And I introduced these girls coming on stage, just models. As they came up onto the stage, the last person coming up out of the dark shadows was Robin Williams. He pulled his jacket low over both shoulders and he walked on like it was a sort of low-slung dress. Right behind him. And I was off stage now, standing with the producer, and he says, hey, get back up there. That's Robin Williams. Interview him. I said, I can't go up there now. The girls are... Get back up there. So I went back on stage. I said, hi, Robin. He goes, hi. It wasn't a man of many words either. But every way he said anything made you laugh. And so I knew he had a ranch somewhere in that area. I didn't know where it was. So I said, you live around here somewhere, don't you, Robin? Yeah, I've got a ranch just down the road. We couldn't see the audience because the spotlights are on the stage. So it's a black area out there with a lot of people. And I said, I knew he'd just come out of rehab, but he'd been for quite a while. And I said, so Robin, you must know a lot of these people in the audience, I said, because he lives so local. And he gets on the end of the stage and he goes like this. Yep, no more. Saw him in rehab last week. As fast as that, he was just a brilliant interview and a lovely, lovely man. And the other guy is a big, well, he is a friend because I have his personal number, is Ben Stiller. He's also a great pal and very supportive of my rhino work. And of course, he was a big supporter of Paul Sherwin in his work in Uganda. And he lives in New York. And so he's another guy. He's been to the race. His former wife, I think he's his ex-wife now. She came with him because according to Ben, his wife fancied me. So I didn't argue with that. She was
She's only human, mate. She's only human.
No, I've met some lovely people. Well, the common denominator amongst them all, I think, is they're very nice people. They're very humble people. They've developed the talent which they had to get where they got, but it doesn't make them any different to anybody else. And I like that.
Yeah. So you talked about Tour de France coming up. How much prep work is required in the lead up to a Tour de France?
Not so much as the pre-computer days, because I do it literally every day of my life. Even now through COVID, I've not commentated since the Tour Down Under. I've done my notes every day ever since. I've done them already this morning. Just keeping my eye on things and noting what's going where and who's going where. And my records on the Tour de France are second to none. And I update them whenever I necessarily update. You know, you give me a name and I can tell you a flick of a pen how many stages he's won, where he's won them, and how many tours he started in, how many tours he's finished, etc. Just like that. So I don't have to worry about the night before swatting that hard anymore. Of course, these days now with the internet too, although even the internet makes mistakes, you do have to check on it. But I don't have to do it anymore. The one every 4 years, the Olympics, or every 2 if I do the winters, I have to work pretty hard. I have to work very hard on the Winter Olympics because they're alien sports to me. But on the Summer Olympics, I just do. I'm always conscious of it, doing notes, and I just do them. I don't wait until the last minute, so I don't have to spend 100 hours in the week before the tour swatting in the press rooms, just getting the latest news. That's all.
So the Winter Olympics. So what other sports have you commentated on? We know, cycling is your passion, and you've done the Winter Olympics. What else have you done?
Well, it all started very strange for me. 1980 Moscow was my first Olympics, and I'd been commentating only a few minutes a year, because 78 I did 40 minutes live, and I hardly did another race, maybe an hour total on the Tour de France in the July, and nothing till the next year. 79 I got a little bit more with some of the classics, but only wrap-ups, 20-minute wrap-ups on British television, work for no one else. And then they got the Olympics. So I went to the Olympics in 80. And of course, as I found out, it don't stand in the production room if you're not working, because they look for commentators to cover. And I got the job of doing archery, and also judo. Now, archery, I used to shoot. So I was a member of the Whittle Archers. So I used to shoot. And I knew all about how to shoot and the rules of the game. I knew nothing about judo, not a simple now. But the producer said, don't worry, he said. It's only, we may have to voice a few things, but don't worry, it'll never go on air. But they have to cover themselves with a voice. Well, guess what happened? We got an archer and a judoka into the game for the bronze medals in both. So they both were going live, except I couldn't do live. I'm only one person, and at the same time. So I voiced over the judo fight, and I voiced live the Mark Blinkan, the guy's name was, his shoot off for the bronze, which he got. But they both got the bronze. So that was the start of me doing other sports. But I had to research those. I went and met the judo players who were only grateful for anything, because nobody talked about them ever outside of Olympic Games. And they were great guys, big, but great guys. And then I did other things, like I did the Strongest Man in Britain competitions from the brewery. Those guys were enormous. So were the girlfriends, who also could lift more than I could. And we just, then SBS, that was the ultimate, CBS, sorry. CBS rang me up after a couple of years working on the tour with them. It was 1991. And they said, hey, we got the Winter Olympics next year. So that's good. They said, we want you to work for us. I said, I don't know anything about winter sport except speed skating, because of Trish being a speed skater. I knew everybody. Now we got Eric Hayden for that. Yeah, well, he is better than me. I had that brilliant Olympics in Calgary. We got 5 straight goals in every distance, so it's brilliant. So I said, well, I don't know anything else. Good. He says, well, you can learn with the public. That's what they said. So I said, well, what do you want me to do? They said, we're thinking about it, but we're thinking of you doing the biathlon, which biathlon's about as near as you come to a bike race on snow. It's a mass start event, and it's really exciting. It's shooting as well. And there's the cross country, which is the 50-kilometer fabulous race, brings out tens of thousands of spectators who just have a great time, never go to bed. And so I was happy with that, did my research, and they were flying me to the World Championships by way of a rehearsal, which was in Val di Fiemme in Italy. And I flew to Munich and drove the car, I think Munich, Austria, Italy. And I got there, and I did some of the events, finished them slowly. Then the producer came and said, hey, we've got a problem with the ski jumping. I said, what's the problem? He said, the guy's got a contractual problem with his motor race calling, can't get here. You got to do it. I said, I know nothing about ski jumping. He said, well, you've got time. And he said, but the only problem is it's in London and I'm in Italy, and it's the same World Championships, and I hadn't finished my biathlon. So I had to jump in the car, drive across 3 countries back to Munich, fly to London, run into a studio They got the pictures. I taped them, wrote the scripts, did the ski jumping commentaries, went back to it was a 2-day job, back to the airport, flew back to Munich, couldn't find the car. It was under 2 meters of snow now. I had to find the car and drive back across 3 countries, back to Val di Fiemme, where I did the final of the biathlon, which is always the last final of the long distance Langlauf, they call it, which is always the big coup de grace, the last day of the Olympics. Anyway, did them all. And I lost a few pounds in weight doing all that. And then I went home. About 3 weeks after that, they said, "Hey, good job. We liked you doing the ski jumping best. We want you to do the ski jumping at the Olympic Games in Albertville." I said, "That's fine by me." Okay. There were great storylines at the time. Fabulous ski. We had the youngest athlete ever in the history of the Olympics, Matti Nikkanen, Finnish kid. And he was only 15, and he won. I remember he changed the driving laws in Finland because he was too young to drive a car, and he was given a car by his government as a present afterwards. They had to change the laws. He couldn't drive it. That's another story. But there was great storylines. And so I was very happy doing ski jumping, and it became quite nice. I met the ski jumpers. I remember in the end, the CBS said, "Take the American ski team out for dinner," because they were training locally. And this is now summertime. And get to know everything about the sport. I said, okay. So I took the whole ski team out to lunch, some restaurant. And they looked at me and they said, "Well, the cycling commentator." I said, "Yeah, sorry, guys." I said, "That's why I brought you guys. I know nothing about your sport." "Ah, don't worry about our sport. It's easy. Tell us about Greg LeMond and Eddie Merckx." I spent the whole of lunch telling them my experiences on the tour with Eddie and with Greg. I said, "Guys, you're supposed to enlighten me." "Oh, don't worry about it. Just come those things. You can watch us train." I was none the wiser. But those guys used to write to me after the games are over, and I used to bring them to the Tour de France. And I used to get them VIP tickets to watch the tour. They love the sport, and I love them. And I got great stories out of them. They did the Nordic combined racing as well as the ski jumping, all good stuff. And I love the Winter Olympics. In fact, I think it was in Albertville, I think. I don't know. I got some medal for 5-star commentary, which I thought, well, hell, if they think that was good, I can fool anybody.
Well, the Australians have fallen in love with your commentary, and we still hear you at the Olympics, and we hear you at the Tour Down Under, and some of the other Australian events you do. But we're not hearing you in Australia on the Tour de France anymore. No. So, what happened there? What the divorce?
The sport has grown too big. It's as simple as that. That's why originally I brought Matt Keenan on board by himself, because Paul and I we worked for the Tour de France organization for years, doing what they call a world feed. That's all the countries that can't put their own cameras onto the tour would take a common commentary if it was English. And so they just put the plugs into our commentary when we were giving it to British television and to American television, and they just took it. Our permission was granted, etc. And that was good. But then the organization wanted to show more. So then we had to they came and said, "Is there anybody can stand in doing the commentary before you take commentary?" Because we were only available when we were commentating, and we didn't start commentating until 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And they were now showing the tour from 12 or 1 o'clock. And so it would be silent. I didn't have the time to go and voice that when I should be working with NBC or CBS or whatever it was at the time. And so we worked on finding people, and the best one was Matt. We had 2 others, first of all. It didn't quite work out. So a couple of years down the line, we introduced Matt to the tour. They liked him. And so Matt became the stooge, if you like, the front of the stage act, the warm-up act. And he would get going, and then my commentary in America, a producer would talk to Matt and say, "Right, Matt, in 10 seconds, hand over to Liggett." And I'd hear Matt briefly for 10 seconds saying, "Well, okay, let's join Phil Liggett with 60 kilometers to go." Whatever. I always felt bad about that. There's the guy who really set the whole scene, and we're taking over for the creme de la creme of the stage. Anyway, it worked well. It worked well for a few years. And gradually, they then brought Robbie McEwen alongside Matt, and they were a perfect duo. But at the same time, the tour had a problem. Not only were they now showing it the whole stage, they were also showing pictures we couldn't see. And so we struggled for a year, but we didn't realize what was going on. There'd be a guy being interviewed with sound, and we're still talking about the race. So obviously that was going hopelessly wrong. So what I remember in the March of the year, it happened about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years now, the organization of the Tour de France rang us on Skype. Paul Sherwin in Africa, me in London, them in France. And they said, Phil, there's a problem. I said, what's the problem? We're going to have to just leave the commentary all to Matt Keenan now, because it's not possible unless you can work just for us. I said, we can't. And I said, and if you take us off, you will receive an awful lot of complaints. Well, they said, oh, yes, Phil, but it will last for maybe 24 hours, and then there's no more problem with the complaints. Well, it lasted 4 years, but that wasn't a detriment. There was over 1 million complaints just to the British television network, because I don't appear in Britain either. But however, it was a brilliant situation for Matt, and I brought Matt to the table, and I've got no bad feelings whatsoever. It was a natural progression. And Matt and Robbie, I think, are a great partnership. And so life goes on, John. Everybody in the world needs a break in life. Matt got it, took it, and went for it. And I said the same for the guy that took over my job commentating in Britain. He sent me a lovely letter saying, I didn't ask for your job. And I said, Ned, I know you didn't ask for my job, but I confessed to having a tear in my eyes writing this reply to you, because I will miss it. And I'd worked for them for over 21 years. And they didn't say thanks, of course. But that's television. But yeah, now life goes on. I only work for American TV now, except when I'm with Olympics. Then I work for Channel 7, or I do events like the Tour Down Under, which is a self-standing situation.
And the Bay Crits, mate, of course.
Oh, and the Bay Crits. Sorry. I don't ever turn that down, of course. But I work with a team now.
Well, I remember back in February, we were very lucky that we put together a Phil Liggett roast at Jerry's Prince Hotel. And Matt,
I thought you might be setting up a retirement party.
Matty Keenan and Robin McEwen were both so keen to be a part of that, because they think the world of you, and it was a really special night. It was a lot of fun.
It was that's a Jerry Ryan promotion. It's always good fun, but I was flattered by the people that did turn up, and they all kind of kept it a secret. I thought, well, I don't quite know what I'm walking into here, because I'd been told by you to keep that night free. Jerry was going to do something, but what the hell is going on? And then I get, I'll see you on Monday. What the hell are you talking about? People like Phil Bates coming from Sydney, and Peter Coggo, and everybody. Oh my goodness! Well, seems like it's pretty special. But it was a lovely, enjoyable time. Really,
it was supposed to be a roast, and the only person who actually tried to roast was me, and Jerry had to go.
Buying a drink. What else is there to say bad about me?
Let's see. No one could, exactly as you said. They couldn't find anything bad to say about you. It ended up being a tribute, but it was a really wonderful, wonderful night.
It was a good story.
Yeah. In the early days of your commentary, did you get advice from? Was there a commentator out there that you looked up to, that you turned to for advice?
None. I got the job before I was. I did. I never looked up to anybody, but I wasn't that big-headed. I listened to everybody and just see how they did it, but I never got any advice from it. Of course, getting the job was a bizarre situation. For 5 years, I sat alongside the guy who was doing the commentary, David Saunders, who had facilitated me as his driver on the Tour de France from 1973 until he was killed in a car in March 1978. And we were great friends. And David, look, in my opinion, he wasn't the best commentator, but he put cycling on the map in Britain, and he brought things to life. And I was listening to an old commentary only the other day, and to hear his voice again was special to me. It was a very, very English voice. Well, he was an ex-Grenadier Guardsman, so he's guarding the Queen. Anyway, we used to do everything together. He had a great sense of humor, loved him. And I sat by him on the commentary position, but I had no part of the television. I sat by him because there was an empty seat, and I was able to get a good view of the race. No other reason. And then we did Paris-Nice together. And halfway through Paris-Nice, he got his big break on British television. They wanted him back to do Superstars, which is a big, heavily watched program in Britain, where all the superstars out of the main frame do things. And cyclists were always hopeless, but the athletes, or usually the F1 drivers, always won because they were the fittest guys. Anyway, he said, would I cover for him for his newspaper and write his story for the remaining 3 days of the race, and get the car back home, because I was now alone on the route to Paris-Nice. So I dropped him off at the airport. He flew home, did a great job of the show. I finished the race off and I drove home from Nice. I used to get the 6:45 train from Nice, and I used to wake up in London, and then wake up in Calais, jump the boat, get home and drive home. So I was home about 15 hours later, having driven for 12 hours. He went berserk when he heard I'd driven for 12 hours, but I never get car sickness or go to sleep. I just do it. I do a lot in Africa, drive long times. Anyway, so I got home and I rang him Monday morning. I said, hi, David, it's Phil. How was the show? Oh, thanks. It was great. He said, it went really good. Where are you? I said, I'm at home. What? He said, you stupid boy. How do you get home so quick? Beat him there. I said, but look, the big thing is, David, let's get the car back. It was a hire car. It was a gift from Honda. Let me bring you the car back so you can return the car. And that's fine. So I arranged to meet him at King's Cross Station. I drove to London, gave him the car, got on the train from King's Cross, which goes back to my home, got home, message on the answer phone from his wife. And she said to Maggie, Phil, you should sit down. David is dead. I looked at the phone. I rang Maggie briefly. Then the phone started. David's newspaper rang me, asked me to write an obituary. The BBC sports radio said, would I do 20-second, 30-second obituary on the sports program that night? And I sat on the edge of the bathtub up in the house upstairs. I just cried. I just couldn't accept it, couldn't work it out. And then I got a phone call from ITV, from the people that had been producing the World of Sport program Saturday afternoon. They said, Phil, we have had a lot of applicants for David's job, most of them before he was even cold, and none of them will get a reply from us. If you want the job, we know David would have loved you to work with him. We didn't have the money for 2 commentators. And I'd never done any commentary apart from BBC radio reports and a bit of speaking at the races. And I just said, look, I'll do it because of David. I know David would like me to do it. And I had no ambition to be a TV commentator, except, sometimes I looked at the pictures and felt I could see more than David saw, but that's fine. So then I took the job, and then they said, well, you're going to learn the hard way. In 4 weeks' time, we're doing our first show on TV, 45 minutes live coverage of this race from Alexandria, from Crystal Palace. And that's where you'll learn. Sink or swim, mate. I said, thanks. I'm in. And that was it. That's so David was a mentor, but never, nobody ever advised me. I think, no, I wasn't naturally talented at riding a bike, but maybe I was at talking about nothing. I don't know.
Well, mate, that's what it is. That we joke about the voice of cycling, but you've got a style of talking that just entertains people. I remember
it's the right word, John, and that's what I feel.
No, but seriously, I remember standing there one day in the Bay Crits, and you were telling a story, and there were a large crowd in front of the stand, and you're telling a story. And I remember thinking, look at them. They're all just absolutely enthralled. I said, if I was telling this story, they'd all be walking away. But it's the way you tell it. It's definitely the way you tell it.
I remember the organisation on the tour walking past me once, and I was inside the compound. I couldn't get out. There must have been 100 people asking for my autograph. And one of the organisers said, I feel you're pretty popular, eh? I said, well, what can I say? I look at myself in the mirror and think, what the hell do they see in me? But the other commentators don't get asked for their autograph. And I can't walk anywhere. And they want my autograph. And I don't know what it is. I love people. That's the bottom line. And maybe that comes through. I'm just going to sign and throw it off and say, thanks a lot. I want to say, where are you from? How are you? And we talk. And I see it all the time on Twitter, people saying, I met him once, and they name the date and they say, this is what we talked about. And I'll write a little note saying, it's nice to hear from you again.
So you mentioned a couple of names earlier. You said you mentioned Eddie Merckx and Greg LeMond. But what are the riders that stand out in your memory over the different generations?
Well, Eddie is without doubt the finest cyclist ever lived. I'm just wondering now, this Remco Evenepoel, who is just won the Tour of Poland, I think he might be the next Eddie Merckx. He is an absolute superstar, got all the right attitude. But Eddie, for me, I raced against Eddie once, and of course I didn't beat him. And I thought Eddie was the guy, when I had to make a decision, be a journalist or be a pro in Belgium. I had the pro contract on the table, and I was wintering back in London, and I got the offer of a job in Fleet Street. I had to make a decision: stop cycling, which I didn't do, but stop being any ambition, and then and take the job. And I took the job, and the reason was I couldn't beat Eddie Merckx. This guy was unbeatable. He's the only guy. I've interviewed top pros, and I said, who's going to win today? And they've said to me, it depends. If Eddie wants to win, then we race for second. This is the world. And Eddie was brilliant. And since then, of course, we've become very, very good friends indeed. And I've interviewed Eddie around the world on stage, and he's always brilliant with me. And he's the most difficult person to interview. If he doesn't know you, you'll get nothing out of him. And I've got some great things out of Eddie Merckx. Great. One of the best interviews I ever did with Eddie was on stage at the Legends dinner in the Tour Down Under a few years ago. And I remember going up to him afterwards, because Eddie's always nervous as hell before he goes up. And I tried to relax him. I went up to him afterwards, straight afterwards. He'd sat down again and said, Eddie, you see, you were absolutely brilliant tonight. And he just looked at me and said, no, Phil, you were brilliant. It was his way of saying, you got me to speak. And I've done it all over the world with him. So, and it might happen again too in Australia. There's plans afoot, but we'll see. But anyway, the very first time I got to see Eddie again was when he had his factory in Brussels, which is also his home. And I went there to do an interview for World Cycling Productions. And I sat down with Eddie. He had his world hour record holder's bike, the original, stacked up in his office, always kept it in view of where he worked. I said, well, Eddie, I said, you're the very reason I never turned pro, you know. He goes, you? I said, yes. I said, why? He said, why? I said, because I could never beat you. And he just looked at me, and his eyes went down to my feet and slowly come up to my eyes. And he said, you beat me. I said, that's why I didn't turn pro. And we have become great friends. I interviewed him before the start of the tour last year, which started in Brussels, which is a big honor for Eddie, 50th year since his first yellow jersey. And I went to his house. It took ages to get an interview with him. I'm a mates. He never answered my first mail at all. Never answered my second mail. I got his personal address, so I knew he was seeing him. And then I sent a letter to Axel Merckx in Canada, his son. I said, actually, your dad's not speaking to me. All I want to do is have a quick word with him about this wine, because I was doing some wine commercials for South Africa. And I just want Eddie to be in Eddie's home. He was the big icon of this tour in Brussels. And he says, oh, my dad, he's, you know what he's like. He said, I think he only wants to do it speaking in French. So I wrote back to it, we'll speak it in French if we have to. But I said, but his English is fine once I get going. And so he wrote back and he said, just go and see him. He'll see you. So I wrote to Eddie, I said, Eddie, I'm coming over. Sent him the date. I said, the wine will arrive one day before me from South Africa. Do not drink it. And they sent the finest wine. God, the wine was good. I'll tell you, it was good. It was Jerry Ryan standard. And I went with the camera crew. Eddie was exceptional. He opened the door. Phil, lovely to see you. The kisses, the hugs, all the things we can't do these days. And then we went in, we sat down, and I said, Eddie, did you get the wine? Yes. I said, well, where is it? Oh, it's upstairs. He put it away. He'd already locked it up. I didn't like telling him some bottles are mine. I couldn't take them off him. So he got the lot. But he went and got one bottle. We pulled the cork and we put it in front. And we just talked. He never mentioned speaking in French. His replies were very, very understandable. I've got the video still. And we talked about the honour of the race honouring him. He had double-sized, human-sized posters on all the metro stations of Brussels. And the guy's a baron of Belgium. He's got every award they can give him. And he's still a natural man. He always complains. Nothing changes with age, always complaining. But I've been to his house a few times. And anyway, when I said, would you like to check the wine at the end of the advert, well, it's like an interview. And I saw his eyes change. I don't know what he thought of South African wine beforehand, but this clearly hit the spot. It was delicious. I noted it because he poured the rest back in the bottle, put the cork back on it. He wasn't throwing any of that wine away after the show was done. Eddie and I are great friends, and I just love the man. Greg LeMond, he was a bit longer getting to know. He's very American, of course, but his comeback from his accident was a fairy tale for American television at the time. And I've done that story many times. Greg, when he got blasted in the back by his brother-in-law hunting turkeys, Greg was in the bush. Brother-in-law thought it was a turkey and blasted the bush, and it was Greg. Greg would have died if there hadn't been a helicopter flying over the park, going to a road traffic accident, and the pilot had to make a decision. And he chose Greg, and he landed the chopper. And if he hadn't, Greg would have died on the spot. They got him and saved him, and of course, Greg came back and won the tour, just like Lance did. It was an amazing scene.
I heard that later on, there were so many pellets that had to leave in him that he got lead poisoning, which stopped him racing like after he came back.
Yes, and there's still in the walls of his heart, he's still got those pellets. You can't get them out. It's too risky, apparently. But that guy was magic. He signed a big deal with Z, and $5.5 million. And the guarantee he would win the tour for them. And he did it in the first year of the contract. I remember him saying to me, hey, I've done it already. I'm not going to worry about the next 2 years. Yes, that's Greg. Greg and I have also go down a long way. We went fishing in New Zealand a couple of years ago. He caught the biggest, but I caught the most. So I don't know who won.
So, Phil, it's been an absolute pleasure, as always, to have a chat, to catch up with you. And
you bring the best out in me, John. That's the problem. What the viewers think.
I'm going to ask the question because people say to me, oh, when's Phil Liggett going to retire? And I always tell them when they nail that the lid on that box, that'll be when he retires. But that's what I say.
Well, Patricia asked the same question, but she knows that basically, as I haven't got a job to start with, what I do for sheer pleasure. I feel a bit like David Attenborough, who's now into his mid-90s and still works when he wants to. I've been pretty busy during lockdown, but I haven't earned a penny in actual money since the tour down under in January. As some would say, well, you don't need to worry about money, and you're probably right. But the fact is that I just can't keep out of it. I just can't keep out of it. I mean, I've had lots of Zoom calls. I never heard of Zoom till this year. Lots of Zoom calls. I've done a couple of commercials for various people who wanted things topped up and stuff. And endless podcasts. You're the very latest. I've got the very latest information. But I've never seen my job as a job. I've seen it as my hobby extended into a career. I've met terrific people around the world. The Lance saga was out of contact with the way of my life, and it did leave a stain on my heart in many ways. However, I've got no regrets on anything I did with Lance, and my conscience is absolutely clear. So that's fine by me. Never spoke to Lance apart from a very short interview on NBC television last year. Never spoke to Lance since over 10 years. Over 10 years.
So the future for Phil Liggett. So this year, Tour de France, 2 and a bit weeks. What's going to be your role in the tour?
It's going to be very interesting. The pictures are in France, of course. Phil Liggett will be in Teddington in Middlesex, talking from a studio. And Bob Rowe will be in Stamford, Connecticut, doing the other half of the commentary with me. And, of course, the main team will be in Connecticut as well. All because mainly the Americans can't go anywhere. I don't want to go to America because they've got rather a heavy session over there with COVID. And the Brits ban you from going anywhere for 2 weeks after you get back, and I can't afford to sit in the same room for 14 days afterwards. So it's going to be an interesting race, but we think it's going to work because America's already doing their main sports programs with the commentators working from home. and bringing them together. And apparently it's working extremely well. So I'm hoping you will not see the seams when I work with Bob. And I'm looking forward to working with Bob. He's not Paul Sherwin. He's a different person, which is what we wanted when Paul left us. And I like Bob. I think the viewers do too. So, and I also think, I'm a pessimist, like you said at the top of the program, John. I really am still unsure this tour will get away, but I suppose as we get closer, it's looking more likely. But there are more cases occurring in France just now, so we'll see. But if it does get away, I think we probably will see one of the best tours we've ever seen. It's just the way it is. The riders' form cannot be at its best. And I think that's why Milan-San Remo was so exciting. They couldn't get rid of everybody quite as they thought they might. And so I'm looking forward to a great Tour de France. But, 2 days in Nice, we leave on the third day. Nice, I remember when we started in Nice in the 70s, they had to stop the race the minute it started because they couldn't clear the traffic off the Promenade des Anglais. They simply could not clear it. Felix Leviton at the time went berserk. This is the Tour de France. You can't block the roads. And it was a chaotic day. I think there were 9 or 10 kilometers before they got the roads empty and they let the race go. Now, to get those sort of crowds, how are you going to social distance? I've really no idea. But look, like everybody else, one day we will return to normal, and let's hope it happens.
Yes, well, I look forward to listening to your dulcet tones on some events coming up, but especially look forward to catching up in January when this all settles down. Thanks heaps, Phil. Bye, mate.
Thank you, John. Thanks a lot, mate.